All join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Let the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up on a Saturday morning. How do y'all do with discipline? Discipline, for those who didn't hear it. Something to think about. Your level and ability to have discipline. It's something that I think is definitely overlooked and not discussed enough with Buddhist practice. And without it, you're going to have a really difficult time with Buddhist practice. And for those who are new, when I say you're going to have a difficult time with Buddhist practice, what that in essence translates to is you're going to suffer a lot. That's what difficulty with Buddhist practice actually means, is you're going to have a lot of suffering in your life. So once we begin to see that Buddhist practice is just a reflection of your life, then we can drop the idea that Buddhist practice is about learning something from a book or outside of yourself. And then we bring it into our internal, actual, real lives. And we say, am I happy? Am I sad? Am I joyful? Am I miserable? Am I feeling pleasant? Am I feeling depressed? When we answer those questions, we can then tie it back directly to our ability to practice what the Buddha actually said. And this is why I bring up discipline, because the ability or inability to have discipline mentally, physically, and emotionally is really the foundation of practice. Because we often talk this in simple forms. Buddhism breaks down to, those of you who've listened to me year after year after year, 3 things. What are they? Think, good thoughts, speak, good words, and do good deeds. That requires discipline. You ever have a thought that's not so pleasant? It requires discipline to let that thought pass and come back to present moment. You ever say words that aren't so gentle or kind? That requires discipline to recognize you're about to say words that aren't so gentle or kind, or gossip or slander, and stop doing them. Do you ever do things that aren't so gentle or kind? It requires discipline to not do those things. There's a great, I think he even turned it into a book. I forget his name, but he was a military sergeant, maybe Marine, maybe Navy, I forget, my apologies. But he gave a commencement graduation, right? Yeah, he gave a commencement speech that might have been West Point or a military academy, I believe. And the topic, anyone seen this, was about making your what? Your bed every day. And I think he turned it into a book. Is anyone, right? I don't know if this is a title, like Make Your Bed or something like that, but it's a beautiful talk about making your bed. And the entire, to me, the message, I haven't read the book, but I've listened to his talk a number of times, is the simple practice of beginning your day with making your bed. And it sounds so silly, but Show of hands, how many of you do not make your bed? Like if we went to your room right now, would your bed, I didn't even finish, hands are up, right? If we went to your room right now, would your bed just be an absolute mess with your crap thrown all over it? Show of hands? All right, so all of you are failing and all of you are doing well. But it's such a little thing. And if you're brand new to Buddhism and you showed up thinking you want to learn about Buddhism and some dude is talking about making your bed, you are at the right place. But it's a little thing like that starts your day, right? If you sleep in a bed. Some people don't have that privilege and that luxury, but if you do, that starts your day. And it starts with taking time. I mean, how long does it really take to make your bed? Even if you have like all the fluff and pillows and 3 layers of pillows and whatever. But a minute, 2 minutes? I mean, maximum, maybe 3 minutes, right? Try that. And it begins to program and train your mind to have discipline, to do things, especially if it's not a habit. So for all of you who raise your hand that don't make your bed, for the next week, try making your bed. And it's not about your bed being made or not being made. It's about, is your mind willing to break free from the habits that you've had for so long that cause so much of your suffering? And that means creating new conditions, new habits, new behaviors, new disciplines that are different from what you normally do. Because if you can't even discipline yourself to make your bed for a week, how are you going to discipline yourself to do all the other stuff we talk about, right? It's a lot easier to make your bed, I think, for most people, than it is to be kind. So start with making your bed. If you want to be kind and you want to be gentle and you want to be happy, see if you can just make your bed for a week. So you can all report back next Saturday on how that went. All right, so we'll start with the meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, welcome. Thanks for being here. You can also make your bed, even though half of you are probably still in it. A couple things to tell you before we begin. For those who might be sitting for the first time with meditation practice, nothing's going to happen to you. Right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are in a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward. If you're on a bench or chair, same thing. Just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or lap. Find a position that's comfortable. If you need to move, simply move, but trying to stay relatively still. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. Simply move and then return to stillness. Most important, you're not trying to stop your mind. You're not trying to think nothing, and do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And when ready, slowly open the eyes. Slowly beginning to move. The most important, the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, move the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction, an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He's a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every day. This practice is learning how to have discipline and control how we respond to life. Pratitya samuppada, dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. It is the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what we have control over is our reaction to everything that occurs in our lives. We don't have control over what's created necessarily in and around our lives, but we have control over our reaction. Let me rephrase that. We have the ability to have control with practice. What is that practice? Discipline. What is one way to discipline? Make your bed and meditate. Not meditate to escape, not meditate to relax, not meditate to think that's going to solve your problems. Meditation is disciplining the mind to be present. That's what this practice is. And learning to be with life as it arises, which often is filled with conflict and chaos and challenges and difficulties. If you showed up here on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, you've already figured that out by now. Life is not easy. That Buddha dude knew what he was talking about when he said life is filled with suffering. That's how we all end up here. It doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means that we're going to experience tremendous amount of suffering throughout our lives. And this practice is to help us minimize the amount of suffering that we experience, which comes back to training the mind. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, becoming aware of everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do. And understanding how our thoughts and words and actions impact our lives and the lives of those around us. And that's why for me, very often people think that there's some like deeper Buddhist thing or deeper Buddhist practice. The deeper Buddhist practice comes from you making greater changes in your life. And that has nothing to do with where you are. It has nothing to do with who's teaching you. That has nothing to do with what you read. That has to do with you. You making changes in your life. And very often we think that if we learn about Buddhism, that that's going to be the thing we need to make us happy. That's just a trigger. It helps us realize that we have everything we need in our lives right now to be happy. We just have to stop and appreciate it and be grateful for it. Cutting through craving, cutting through desire. That's the practice. And it never changes. There's no more than that. There's no like, okay, well, what else? I got that. What's next? No, you don't got that. We might intellectually have heard it 1,000 times. But if you're honestly looking at your life, we don't get it. And so we practice. And when I say we don't get it, it's not a judgment or an attack or like, how dare you, terrible Buddhists. It's the recognition that, yeah, I know intellectually, and I've heard the same stuff over and over and over again, and I have to be patient with myself and keep practicing it. The teachings don't get more complicated. They really don't. They're actually quite simple. Crave less, desire less, appreciate more. And just practice that every single day for the rest of your life. And your life will change. Potentially. So with that, I'll pause. Just open up to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice. For those who are joining virtually, again, thanks for being here. There's a chat box on your screen. Feel free to say hello. If you have any thoughts or questions, put them there. I'll do my best to respond. But we'll just open up to questions. Anything you're sitting, yeah. Go ahead.
Judgment from the practice. What does that actually mean?
When you say judgment from the practice, can you expand on that a little bit? You mean?
You're saying, during the opening, do this, do that. Don't look too hard on the judgment from the practice.
If I think I understand what you're saying, are you referring to when I talk about don't judge yourself with your practice?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So very often, not for everybody, but very often people who are new or, and by new I mean been at this for 10 years, right? Will often judge themselves. Well, I've been doing this meditation stuff, I've been doing my Buddhist stuff, I've been reading my Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh and Pema Chodron, and I still get pissed off. And so very often people will then judge themselves and think, well, this Buddhist stuff doesn't work, or I'm a terrible meditator, or I'm a bad Buddhist, or I'm a failure. All those judgments that I referenced, we've been doing that, most people, many people, some people, to themselves about everything else in their lives, which very often is what leads somebody here on a Saturday at 11 o'clock. So when you begin to bring Buddhist practice into your life, don't apply those same practices of judgment and critique. Just understand that it's just a practice. It's not about winning. It's not about getting better. It's about slowly making changes in your life as often as possible and not thinking that you're a failure because you still have craving or desire. Because that's a very real thing that will happen with people. Very often people have been so conditioned to think that like, oh, I should get it. And they've been at this stuff for like 6 weeks, and they're like, oh wait, what's next? You know, you have to be patient without judgment and critique of yourself is the practice. Does that address what you're? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
What else?
Did you touch on Thich Nhat Hanh's statement that nirvana is the absence of view?
Mm-hmm. So there's a teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's to me, one of the best teachings I've ever heard. You can YouTube it. The title is "What is Nirvana?" and it's like 7 minutes and 42 seconds or something like that. And he says Nirvana is freedom from views. And as you've heard me talk about many times, every time I say freedom from views, or I should say the first time I heard that talk, freedom from views, I had a view of that teaching. My view was, is this right? Is this wrong? Do I agree? Do I disagree? It's very often what people do in places like this is they sit there, whether it's me or anybody, it doesn't matter what temple you're at or any spiritual practice. And very often we get wrapped up in judging the person or the words, as opposed to recognizing how are they sitting with me, which is a little bit different from your question, but I just want to point that out, that's when I heard that teaching, freedom from views, I thought to myself, do I agree with that? Right? What am I actually going to challenge Thich Nhat Hanh and his teachings? You know, like how arrogant of a Buddhist am I, right? And what I realized ultimately as I listened to that over and over and shared it over and over, and for me, sharing it for years also helped me continue to settle in with that teaching. And what it ultimately taught me was that I will have views my whole life. I don't think that they're all just going to magically go away just because I'm Buddhist. But can I understand that along with me having views, what does that mean about every other human and sentient being in the world? They also have views. So for me, the practice has been, can I not attach to my views? Meaning, is it quite possible that my views are wrong? Because in that same teaching, he goes on to say, along with freedom from views, nirvana is freedom from views, nirvana is freedom from suffering, which is the practice of freedom from views. He also goes on to say all views are wrong. Wrong views, wrong perceptions. Now, how many of you roam around all day thinking that your views are wrong? Some of you are like, yeah, I knew before I said that where that was going, right? Some of you are like, yeah, I got this. I always think I'm wrong. But the reality is there are times in our lives and arguments or things like that, we're really defending our views and we're stuck on our views. And I don't see this practice meaning that you should surrender or give up those views. That to me is not the teaching. It's not about Buddhist practice, not about being a doormat. Buddhist practice is not about, just passively sitting there and let the world burn itself down as it is now. It is engaging in the world. But it's engaging in the world to create change, coming from a place of compassion, love, and understanding, not from a place where I'm stuck on my view is right, your view is wrong, and so you should go to hell. And I hate you because of your views. That's what this world is right now. Is a whole bunch of people just hating each other for their views. The practice is not for these views to go away. The practice is, can we open our hearts to maybe begin to understand why people have the views they do? Doesn't mean we have to like them or agree with them. They're not changing that many of them. But can I not attach to my views? And ultimately, the practice is to observe life as it arises, right? So again, for me as a practice, I can hear that teaching and say, I practice trying to understand everybody's view about everything. That's a very real practice. Do I think I'm anywhere close to being free from views? No. But free from views would mean I'm actually observing life as it arises without any view of it whatsoever. And I'm actually watching life occur without throwing my judgment on it. Really difficult.
Is that kind of like maybe blend with equanimity?
Yeah, the question was, does that blend with equanimity? In a way, yes, but I want to be very careful, especially since I'm talking about this, especially for those who might be new. Equanimity or everything I'm talking about doesn't mean that you don't care. It's not like just saying, well, the world is, a mess and I don't care because I'm Buddhist, so I'm just going to sit here in my privilege and be safe and okay. That's not the practice. But equanimity, yes, is recognizing that when things occur, they will trigger us in very deep ways. And these triggers will cause a lot of pain and suffering in ourselves. And then we often act out back, we kind of respond back, act out from that trigger because we lack the equanimity. Emotionally, we're just devastated.
I'm kind of trying to reconcile where I sit with society and what's happening and going, okay, am I going to try to go from being an observer to being more of an activist? And what does that mean?
Yeah. Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King, Dalai Lama, Gandhi, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, they were activists. It's a pretty good list of people there. Right? They were activists. They were not sitting under trees on their ass doing nothing.
Which is confusing because...
Why? It shouldn't be confusing.
No, I know. I'm not saying that. It isn't.
You are. You just said it's confusing.
Okay, forgive me.
No, you're not wrong. You said it's confusing, and then I responded, and go ahead.
I lost my train of thought.
Good. All right. When I said
I
that,
got defensive.
you got defensive. When I said they're not sitting on their butts, you said that's confusing you. Where's the confusion?
That to be an activist seems to me that you need to have a point of view to be able to act upon.
Yes. So what he said was, and I've been doing this with Tom for years, for those of you who think I'm just picking on some, person. What you just said, that to you an activist means that you have to have a point of view. That's what you just said, right? The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he had a point of view. His view was, we suffer, and it sucks, and I want to change it. That's a view. Have your views. Do not allow your views to cause your suffering. Can you engage in the world, and this is as Thich Nhat Hanh called it, engaged Buddhism, can you engage in the world as an activist and come from a place, the problem is not your view. The problem is when you are in a position of an activist and you are hating the person or people or other views, and you are coming from a place of anger, as opposed to coming from a place of love, compassion, and understanding. That's the challenge. So that's where I say it shouldn't be confusion, meaning there shouldn't be meaning be an activist. The hard part is to be an activist without hating the people you are being an activist towards.
Or fearing them.
Or fearing them. All of that. That's the challenge. Not an easy one. So if anything, I would wrap your head around the confusion around how am I going to do that? Does that make sense? Not easy.
It's a hard one to wrap.
It's a hard one, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm a fan of being an activist. Yeah, it's a hand in the back there.
Well, at the beginning, now like it's a topic, maybe on the next topic. You said three things at the beginning. I think one of them was Dharma.
Yeah.
Familiar with three terms? Maybe I was wondering.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, at the beginning, we do what's called taking refuge. And we take refuge, the word refuge, different things, different people, but comfort, safety, protection, whatever that word means to you. And it's in Buddhism called the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha, finding safety, comfort, protection, not in the Buddha himself, because he died 2,500 years ago and can't help you much right now, you're on your own, right? But we take refuge in what's called bodhicitta, or Buddha nature, meaning that the Buddha was human, figured out how to end suffering. So for me, as a practitioner, I find great comfort in knowing that if some other dude could figure out how to end his suffering, then so can I. So that brings me a sense of peace, knowing that I have the ability to end or at the very least decrease my suffering. The second one is the Dharma, and that's the teachings. Everything we talk about, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom, all the kind of key Buddhist teachings, that's the Dharma. It's what the Buddha taught. And then the third one is the Sangha. At the time of the Buddha, it was the Sangha, it was the monks and the nuns, all the disciples. You know, modern day today, Sangha is a group of people like this coming together to practice meditation, spiritual practice. That's your community. I like to expand Sangha also to the people you're stuck on the freeway with at 5 o'clock on the 805 South, you know, trying to go from like Poway to Chula Vista or, you know, wherever it is. That's also your Sangha, because if you treated them the same way you treat the people here, did you flip anybody off here today? Not yet. I mean, we're not done yet. There's time, I guess. But if we treat those people the same way we treat people here, yeah. It's always fascinating to me, like when we wrap up here in a few moments and there's, I don't know, 50, 60 people here, you're all going to go out to get your shoes that are all in a really small area. To me, that's like traffic. Nobody, unless it's me trying to run out and get downstairs, is pushing people out of the way, right? Nobody's like, get out of my, nobody's like, why are you in my lane? Nobody flipped anybody off. Nobody cursed anyone trying to get to the shoe rack. There is a traffic jam that occurs when this class is done to get your shoes. And people are so kind and calm and peaceful. That's no different than the 805 at 5 o'clock. You have somewhere you want to get to, which is to your shoes. Traffic, you have somewhere you want to get to, which is wherever you're going. Treat those people the same way you treat people here. That's your Sangha. That will change your life. But people are like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to learn about Buddhism. You know? I need another Dharma book. Traffic, or any situation you find yourself uncomfortable or unpleasant in, that is your deepest practice. Does that help?
Yeah,
Yeah. What else?
Why is there 3 Buddha statues?
Say again?
How come there's 3 Buddha statues?
Oh, there's a lot more than 3. You're just sitting all the way in the back. You can't see them all, right? So is your question like about the number 3 or why have them at all?
Yeah, there seems to be some kind of symbolism.
Yeah, definitely. Are you the student here for the first time?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Welcome. I also went to a Buddhist place 20 years ago for the first time with my best friend who was a student. So be careful. I always like to share, and then I'll touch on them, you know, maybe specifically a little bit. But years ago, somebody asked, his name is Master Huiguang, a Buddhist monk, great teacher, good friend. And they had gone to a Zen center, and the Zen center only had a rock on the shrine. And somebody asked him, you know, we hosted him at the old Buddha for You, probably 12 years ago now. And somebody asked him about like, hey, what's up with the rock? You know, they didn't have a Buddha statue. And his answer to me still was one of the best things I've heard. He said, if you can look at the rock and understand that there is no difference between the rock and the Buddha, then you just need the rock. But if you still think that there's a difference between the rock and the Buddha, then you need the Buddha for a while until you understand that the Buddha is no different than the rock. And I thought that was brilliant because our minds are very difficult to explore and observe and be with. And we're not quite ready for the rock yet. And So in brief, the large three, right? They're what's called bodhisattvas. They're not even Buddhas. They're called bodhisattvas. And bodhisattva means an enlightened being. So this one over here is Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. Or I'm sorry, Samanta Manjushri. And he represents great wisdom. Very often you'll see there's the Tibetan version right there, that second time on the wall there, he holds a sword. It's considered the sword of wisdom. And wisdom is what we use in the Buddhist teachings to cut through ignorance. Any sort of anger, any sort of discomfort in our mind that causes all of our suffering, the wisdom is what we use to cut through it. And in this version of Manjushri, you see him on a lion. What's your name?
Alfred?
Alfred. Have you ever been in a cage with a crazy wild lion? No. Someday someone's going to say yes to that, but not yet. So imagine what it would be like. Pretty scary, yeah? That's a metaphor of being with our own mind. And so taming the wild lion is just like trying to tame our own mind. Well, with the practice of wisdom, you can come up after and take a closer look, but he's sitting on a pretty cute, playful little happy baby lion. So with the practice of wisdom, we turn the crazy wild lion, which is our mind, into something that's pleasant and peaceful, which can also be our mind. This one is the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. He represents great diligence, great practice, great effort. I like to put discipline in that category. But you got to be careful because you have to have intention as well. And so the diligent practice, the 6 tusks represent what's called the paramitas. Translates to perfection, but it's really just 6 practices to overcome suffering. And that's generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. And this is our practice, the Bodhisattva practice. And then in the middle here, we have Kuan Yin. Her name literally means "hear of the world's cries." So in Tibetan Buddhism, they say Kuan Yin, the Dalai Lama, is the literal rebirth of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. So Kuan Yin, she would hear all the suffering in the world and then pour out compassion to heal. Often Kuan Yin is seen holding, or like she is here pouring out with the base, and that's considered the base of compassion. So when we moved here, we always, from downtown for 10 years, we always had the emaciated Buddha, which is also behind me here. That was our temple statue. And then we moved here 7 years ago, and about 5 years ago, we were asked what we wanted to use or do to complete the shrine. And so for us, this was very proper and appropriate. And we wanted the Kuan Yin in the middle. You don't typically see a Buddhist temple with Kuan Yin as your main shrine piece. You would typically see the Buddha. But for us, we felt, one, we had our emaciated Buddha, and we felt what this temple, what this city, what this country, what this world needs is more female energy and more compassion. So we went with the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. And I love it because she's actually pouring down the base of compassion onto the emaciated Buddha and everybody else, and just continues out to pour compassion. So that's the 3 statues. And then there's a ton of little ones up here as well, but for the sake of time, I'll let you Google that. Anything else before we close up? Do one more. Yeah.
What's in the little jars?
Say again.
What's in the little jars?
The little white ones there?
Yeah.
They're offerings. So you'll see up here, you'll see the incense offering, you'll see water, flowers. Again, it's not something that, as a Buddhist temple that we put in this culture. We built the Dharma bums to kind of take away a lot of the ritual and cultural barriers, because we found that that's what turned people off. I started at a beautiful Taiwanese Buddhist temple, monastery life, and the bowing, the chanting, the robes, the language, all the offerings, all that kind of stuff. For a lot of people, was cool to watch and see, but it's, wasn't what most people really were doing. So I called it a revolving door, where people would show up and observe it once or twice, and then they wouldn't come back. But for us, it's these offerings we do daily, and they're very important. They all represent different things, whether it's impermanence, the practice of generosity, of giving. First thing every single day, we come in here, we do our bowing, we do our offerings, just out of respect and reverence for the history of the practice. But it's not something so much that we, if I had you all walk in and, You had to shave your head and put on a robe and, get on your knees and bow and chant for 3 hours a day. Other than a couple of you, the rest of you wouldn't be here right now. So.
Thank you.
What's the story of the emaciated?
Oh man, I was about to close, so let me, no, it's my favorite story to tell, but let me sum up this story of the emaciated Buddha. He was a prince. Siddhartha Gautama, if you don't know that, the guy who became the Buddha was a prince. I'll wrap up with this quick story. Did you know that the Buddha was a prince? No, right? Oh, okay, now I'll give you like the 2.5-minute version.
He's not a god, right?
He's not a god. There you go. We got enough gods out there, right? We don't need one more. And goddesses. The Buddha was a prince. Siddhartha Gautama, he was born, father was a king, mother was a queen. He was born in India 500 years before Christ. He had all the wealth, all the riches. Imagine being a king or queen, right? Pretty cool. He had it all. And at 29 years old, he snuck out of the palace and he saw what's called the four sights. He saw old age, he saw sickness, and he saw death. And he saw an ascetic, a very simple nun or monk type person. And he said to his buddy, this happened over 4 trips, but to condense the story, he said to his buddy, well, what is this? And does this happen to all of us? And his buddy Chana said, yes, my lord. We all age, we all get sick, and we all die. He'd never seen this because when he was born, it was predicted he would either be a great king or like a wise sage. Well, his father said, I want him to be a king. I don't want him to have this compassionate heart to help people. I want him to be a king. And so when he realized that these things happened, they had the palace, they kept it. Anyone got old, any flowers that were dying, they removed everything. So he never saw these things. They knew that it would hit his heart. So he sneaks out, he sees these things, and he turns to his buddy and he says, hey, I can't continue to live my life this way, knowing that there's a world of suffering out there. So he was a pretty privileged dude. Sneaks out, middle of the night, roams the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. Right when he left, he cut off his long princely hair. That's why you see monks and nuns with the shaved heads. It's symbolic of him cutting off his princely hair. He got a bunch of cloth, he sewed it together and put on a robe. And for 6 years, he lived as a wandering ascetic in India. At 35 years old, he sat down and he said, I'm not moving from underneath this Bodhi tree in Bodh India until I figure out the true nature of why we suffer. And he understood in brief that we suffer because of our own mind. As much as you think it's everyone else around you, no reference to the people you're sitting next to or came with, but as much as we think it's everyone else that's causing our suffering, it's us. And so he taught the Four Noble Truths. So 6 years, he sits down for 21 days, and at the end of 21 days, he realized I figured out the cause of all suffering. Craving, desire, greed, anger, ignorance. And his 5 buddies that were with him, they came back and they said, there's Siddhartha. Looks like he's figured something out. We will sit with him. And where the emaciated Buddha comes in is that while they were on their journey during those 6 years, they thought that the way to overcome suffering was to overcome attachment to physical form. They were Hindu in India at that time. They thought that the body was the cause of their suffering. So they tried to overcome their attachment to it. It said they lived on 1 grain of rice a day. And he was so emaciated, you could take your fingers front to back and they would touch. So they came to a riverbed during that time, and somebody offered him porridge. He said, I'll put the bowl in the stream. If it goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. So he put the bowl in the stream. It went against the stream and decided to eat. Those 5 guys left him. They called him a sellout, a traitor, a food eater. They were really mad. They left him. Then he continued on his own. Lots of other things happened. Then he sat down under the tree, had that awakening, realization, and those 5 guys came back and said, there's Siddhartha, looks like he figured something out. And that's when he taught the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, we all suffer. Doesn't have to be extreme. It can be mayonnaise on a sandwich, whatever it is, right? We suffer. The cause is the greed, anger, ignorance. There's an end to it. That's nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering. And then there's the path, the Eightfold Path. Having correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. That's how we live our lives. And so that's what he taught. And this emaciated Buddha represents when we started the temple, again, 17 years ago, that's where we were, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, near death. And so we didn't, coming back to the earlier question, we didn't want this fully awakened Buddha as our main shrine statue. We were just regular folks. We wanted that dude because that was us. And we needed to learn to be kind and gentle to us and find balance in our lives. so we can help and heal ourselves and the world around us. So that's the emaciated Buddha. Does that help? Yeah, that's the short story. Yeah. All right, so we'll close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out into your traffic jam and sea of shoes. And I should add also that I don't think I said it really represents ultimately balance in the middle path in Buddhism, as it's called, and finding balance in your life, where we live on one extreme and the other, and finding a balance that's healthy. So thanks all for showing up. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple, again, 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up, those of us who lead. We're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, and we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist practice and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from different Buddhist traditions. Every Thursday, 5 o'clock, we do a food redistribution program. We prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the streets. So if you want to improve your Buddhist practice, then do things that help others. People sleeping on a sidewalk every night and feeding them is a great way to recognize how much we have, and that our life really isn't nearly as bad as we might think it is. Couple things out of the ordinary. We have we're coming up on the end of another year, apparently according to these calendars that we follow. So we'll have our 18th annual Dharma Bum Temple New Year's Eve celebration. 7 o'clock, we do a vegetarian potluck. 9 o'clock, I'll do a history and vision of the Dharma Bum Temple up here. And then about 11:30, 11:40, we come up here and we do about a 20-minute meditation, silent, going into midnight. Some people come at 7 and they're at home in bed by 9 o'clock. Some people come at 9 o'clock. Some people come at 11:30 just for meditation. Some stay all night. So if you've never done a silent and sober, we're not silent all night, but just the last 20, 30 minutes. If you've never done a silent and sober New Year, now is your opportunity to get them both out of the way, and I promise you'll still live. So it's really cool to just sit silently it's University Heights, most of the neighbors are asleep. But when we were downtown, it was really cool because you hear the gas lamp and we were silent. Here, we're not really sure if it's midnight yet, but it's still a beautiful way to start the new year, just silent. Which is different than what we're used to. So that's going on. We do need, if there's a couple people, I know we have some really great, strong rock and tree movers. Joe will be outside. We do have a pot, a relatively large pot that needs to move, I think about 30 feet. So if a few people want to help him outside in the garden and anything else you might or need help with, that would be great. Buddha for you is there downstairs. If you need anything, I am gonna cut through traffic and get out of the way first because I hate traffic. But